Are you a seven-figure practice owner that wants to do more without burning out? Join us for the Seven-Figure Practice Retreat, a luxury mastermind where high-level practice owners step away from the day-to-day to build systems, strategy, and freedom in the Dominican Republic. This February, spots are limited, so apply now, and our sponsors are covering 95% of the cost over at practiceofthepractice.com/7. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/7. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Santa, session number 1278. Welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am Joe Sanok, your host, where we help you build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. We are so excited to have you here today, hanging out with us. Now, back in May of 2025, we put on the Group Practice Conference. And at this conference, I had this dream of putting on a conference that was unlike any other. I wanted the feeling to be like connections, that people had time to meet each other. I always hated conferences where the parts that I love the most, probably getting dinner with new people or having drinks at the end of the evening, that part was so small in the calendar. And I spent most of my time just running between breakout sessions and keynotes and all of that. And the other side of it was oftentimes it felt like I would be in a session and it'd be a 90-minute session. And I really only got about 10 to 20 minutes worth of content. There's a lot of fluff in there. It just felt like get to the point. And so for what we decided to do with the Group Practice Conference was we decided that we would have 20-minute sessions on the main stage, all of our keynotes, 20 minutes, and that we would have ample time for breakout sessions, and to have time to dig in, to talk about group practice, to get to know people, and to encourage people that if they're having a great conversation, keep that going. You don't have to come back in. Continue those conversations going. And so we found that the folks that came to the Group Practice Conference in May had such a great time. They felt emotionally connected to other group practice owners. And it was just such a great event that we've tripled the size for May of 2026. We're going to be over at Northwestern Michigan College, right on their campus. And we're partnering with both Headway and the Student Life Department to put this on. And our main stage is going to be where the actual TED Talks of Traverse City take place. And then all of our discussions and our kind of digging deeper sessions are going to be throughout an art gallery. It's going to be just such a fun, unique event that we're super excited about. And lots of you weren't able to make the Group Practice Conference in 2025. And so we want to give you just a little glimpse into that. So we're going to be doing a series every week for a while throughout the end of the year where those 20-minute main stage sessions, we're going to be playing those for you. We want you to be able to learn from all of our speakers that we had, and we want you to get excited for the Group Practice Conference in May 2026. So we want you to get excited for this over at grouppracticeconference.com. That's where you can be on the waiting list so that when tickets go live on Black Friday through Cyber Monday, you can grab your ticket. We want you to get those discounts that we have. We want you to get any of those kind of lowest priced tickets. We know they're going to sell out fast. All of our sponsors have committed to sending emails to their list. And, Headway alone, who is our co-host of this, along with the Student Life Department over at NMC, has 60,000 people on their email list that are part of Headway. So we expect, the 300 or so tickets that we're offering to go quickly. So if this is something that you're interested in coming to Traverse City, we want to make sure you're on that wait list and ready to go on Black Friday so that you can get your ticket. We know they're going to go quickly. So head on over to grouppracticeconference.com and you can watch all the different things going on there and get on the wait list so that when that goes live, you get first access. So let's dive into this episode with some of our speakers from the Group Practice Conference in May 2025.
All right. Who's ready to sell their practice? All right. Take a seat, please. Dan's going to kick off in just a second.
I wish that I had had a Dan King in my life a few years ago, 6 years ago. And Nicole wishes that I hadn't and was glad that I didn't, because I'm sure I could have negotiated way better, way differently than giving Nicole the deal that she got. So if past Joe or future Joe finds a time-traveling machine, we can go back in time to meet Dan King and screw over Nicole. But since that's not anything we can do, I give you the one, the only, Dan King. And you can take a full 20 minutes, so you can understand from me.
Perfect, okay. And Nicole, let's talk afterwards. I'm going to buy it from you. Yeah. So I want to take you back about a year ago. So I am in Toronto Airport. Okay, I'm Canadian originally, live in Miami, but Canadian originally. For my fellow Canadian in the audience, I know there's one. And picture me, I'm not the biggest person, carrying a 30 to 40 pound bag of cat food. Okay, this is like the biggest bag of cat food you've seen in your life. Why? Yeah, right? So I have a very good friend. She's a world-class healer, and she lives in Costa Rica. And she has 2 cats with ringworm. And she cannot get the best quality cat food into Costa Rica. There's like no way to do it. You can't, there's no Amazon, right? And so every 4 or 5 months, she gets this ginormous shipment of cat food into Costa Rica. And I'm visiting Toronto. Her mom happens to live there. And so she said, and I happen to be visiting Costa Rica after that. She finds this out and she's like, you've got to smuggle the cat food in. And I said, well, listen, I'm not a cat food smuggler. I have no idea how to do that, but I'll do my best. So I'm trudging through Pearson Airport. It's one of the biggest airports in the world, with this 30 to 40 pound bag of cat food. And being on Team ADHD, I'm pretty disorganized. And so it turns out I didn't know there was a rule that you cannot check bags if you show up at the airport less than 2 hours in advance of an international flight. Okay? So I show up about 2 hours in advance. I have paid to check my bags, my 2 normal bags. I have paid for an oversized bag because this ginormous cat food bag, right? And apparently it was just 1 pound or 1 something too small to fit in the oversized category. And so they allowed me to check my 2 normal bags, but they did not allow me to check, even though I paid more, right? They didn't allow me to check the cat food. And this prompted this. I became super determined to get through security with the cat food. I was like, there's no way I'm not going to get to Costa Rica with the cat food. So I went to a different departure agent. He was like, nope, the rule is you can't do this. And then I went to the customer service desk, and they said, nope, you can go to Costa Rica, the cat food cannot, right? So I decided, you know what, screw the rules. I'm going to go through security with the cat food. So I got past the guy who was checking my ID, and I got to security, and I put it on the conveyor belt. And it was just too big to go through the conveyor belt. So they told me I could not bring the cat food in. But I was very insistent, politely, but I was insistent. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to open the cat food up so you can look inside. You'll see there's nothing problematic here. And then I'm just going to walk through with the cat food. And they debated it, and they were like, no. And I said, yes. So they brought in like the head of airport security because I was so insistent. So this security guy comes out to talk to me, and I very politely explained the issue. And he said, listen, you can't go through with the cat food. And I said, well, there's got to be a way. And we connected. It turned out he really didn't like the rules too much either. And we were talking it through, and he said, you know, there's another departure agent. If you go to him, he might let you in with the cat food, maybe. So now we're about 45 minutes before this international flight, right? I go back to the departure area, and would you believe, I find this one departure agent, and he asks no questions at all. It's like the most normal thing in the world. He checks the cat food. I'm very much the last person on the flight. I get on there with 20 minutes to go, but the cat food is on. It's been checked. So finally, I land in Costa Rica, and there's a whole mess we don't need to go into, where in my, at the time, very broken Spanish a year ago, I somehow convinced the Costa Ricans to let the cat food in. What does all this have to do with selling a mental health practice, you wonder, right? So the thing about selling a mental health practice or any merger or acquisition is that there's going to be some chaos. There's going to be miscommunication. There's going to be rules that you didn't know existed. You're going to have, probably if you're a founder of a practice, you're going to have lawyers and accountants that are speaking a very different language than you've ever heard before. It's going to feel like gobbledygook to you. But if you find a buyer that is aligned, okay, this is super important. If you find one that wants the same things you want, they'll help you out. And I was lucky to find this head of security just turned out to be aligned with me and was sympathetic to the idea that the rules were kind of silly, okay? So if you find that aligned buyer, you can persevere through a lot of twists and turns. I'm going to warn you, an acquisition it can be an emotionally challenging journey. There's lots of ups and downs. It's very intense. It's intense emotionally from the acquirer's perspective too. So there's going to be ups and downs. And let me tell you, I was sweating bullets lugging that 40-pound bag of cat food through the airport. But in the end, I got it done, okay? And so can you if you want to sell a practice. So today's talk, here's how I'm going to organize it. I'm old school, so no slides other than this one. I'm going to start by introducing me and my company, Fireside Strategic. Then I'm going to go into the meat of the talk, which is going to be the three kind of high-level things you should do to position your practice to sell. Okay, I'm going to tell you what they are now. Number one is get aligned. Number two is get your financials in order. And then number three is going to be think through the three biggest operational or cultural mistakes you've made, and we'll talk a little bit about fixing them, okay? So those are the three high-level things I'm going to talk about. But let's start with me and the business, and then at the end, I'll tell you a bit about what we look for. I'll tell you a bit more about what we look for. When I go through these three things, you can think about them as table stakes, the things that if you do want to sell, you should probably do those things. But at the end, when I talk about our criteria, I'll tell you about some icing on the cake things, some things you can do to really stand out that will really get an acquirer interested, okay? So Fireside is a social impact acquisition firm. I've had some people say, are you an exit planner? Are you a VC fund? We're none of those things. You know, a VC fund usually is buying tech companies, and they have a whole bunch of cash that they have to deploy in like 5 years, and they assume that, you know, they're going to invest in 10 companies, 8 of them will fail, 1 of them will do okay, and 1 of them will produce such a ginormous return that the investors get a good return, okay? We're not of that. We're also not an exit planning firm. What we are is a social impact acquisition firm. So we're a boutique firm in that we're quite specialized just in outpatient mental health. We don't buy businesses in any other space. We have a team of clinicians as well as some finance professionals who are super, super smart. And we are funded by a family office as well as, that's like a wealthy family with a lot of money, as well as some other high net worth individuals. And all of those investors and individuals involved are all aligned. Okay, we all want the same thing. And that is to be culture first investors. So in mental health, and you know, I think it works, you could argue that it works the same in other industries, but what we believe is that in the long term, there aren't trade-offs between people and profit. In the long term, those things fuel each other. And our head clinician is a man named Dr. Michael Goldberg, who built the largest independent practice in the history of Massachusetts to $25 million of revenue. And he did it with extremely high clinician satisfaction. And I can tell you that his clinician satisfaction was higher than if he had made $8 million of revenue or $5 million of revenue a year, okay? He was able to use the profit in order to fuel a culture where clinicians could really thrive. So that's at the core of what we do. The three values that really animate us are number one, you know, culture and profitability fuel each other. Our mission ultimately is to attract and retain clinicians in the mental health professions. We have such a shortage all across the country, and we need to remedy that. We're big believers in remedying that. So the three core values, very, very quickly, are number one, you know, culture and profitability fuel each other. Number two, mental health is not just therapy. You know, we're big believers in building comprehensive behavioral health practices. Therapy is wonderful. We love it. And it is much more effective if supplemented by and sometimes replaced by other modalities. So we're huge, huge believers in the importance of sleep, the importance of food, exercise. We're also big believers in ethical medication management, psychological testing, Spravato. All these modalities are hugely, hugely important in alleviating our mental health crisis. Okay? And then number three, we're big believers in abundance, not poverty. You know, I think a lot of group practice founders, a lot of clinicians have been trained to not love money so much. And we work with some social workers who pay themselves $3 million a year. I love that. I love to see group practice founders and clinicians pay themselves well and do well. You can just do so much. I think Melissa the other day was getting at what you can do when you make more money. And so money and culture are not opposed. They fuel each other.
I want to thank Headway for sponsoring this episode. If you run a group practice, you know that accepting insurance can be overwhelming. Between credentialing, billing, and payroll, the admin side can easily take over your week. Headway was built to help you handle this, and they're the only platform designed specifically for in-network group practices. Whether you're growing your team or running an established practice, Headway makes the business side easier with faster credentialing, higher per-session rates, and bi-weekly payments your team can count on. They work with therapy, psychiatric, and hybrid group practices. There are no subscription fees, just the support you need to run your practice with ease. Run your best group practice with Headway, trusted by thousands of group practice leaders to simplify insurance admin and reach more people through in-network care. Curious how Headway can work for you? Head to join.headway.co/Joe. That's join.headway.co/Joe to learn more.
My background, very, very briefly, is in 3 domains. It's in M&A law originally, then investing, and then organizational psychology and executive coaching. So I started at a very big M&A law firm. I went to the Shark Tank TV show to help one of the Shark Tank investors with the legal aspects of the deals on the show. And I kept seeing the companies that we invested in fail. They would grow initially because they went on air and they would get exposure to a vast audience. But what would happen after that is they would need to hire, they would hire the wrong people, there would be all kinds of problems, okay? So ultimately I saw that we just didn't understand the people side of business, and I wanted to. And so I left law for a time, went back to school, and studied that. Long story short, I wanted, after selling a company and failing at a number of them, I didn't want to build anything from scratch ever again. I wanted to use my skills in M&A, and I wanted to find a space where I felt a sense of mission as well as a business opportunity. And having had formative experiences in college with friends with mental health issues, this was the only space for me. So that's the basics on me and Fireside. Let's get into the meaty stuff. So number 1, alignment. Okay, this is the first and most important thing you need to do. You need to understand what you want. Why are you even speaking to an investor, right? Is it purely financial? Are there things that your business lacks? Okay. Are there things that you want to improve about your business? Who do you want running your business? Okay. What are the values that you have stood for and that you want an investor to stand for? You have to ask yourself these deep questions. Ask yourself where you are health-wise. Do you still have years left in the tank? Do you still want to be running this? Or are you totally exhausted? Do you need to take a break? Are you burned out? Okay. How much potential do you think is still in your business? Do you think it's grown to the extent it can? Do you think you have the ability to unlock more growth? Do you think working with a partner you could unlock more growth? Okay. These are some of the key questions that you need to ask yourself. And so, our model is generally to partner with founders. So we don't buy 100%. Most of the time, people think about selling their business. The automatic assumption is, I'm selling 100% of it, and I'm leaving, right? That isn't necessarily the case. For our purposes, think about 2 types of transactions. Number 1, you sell 100% and you leave. Number 2, you sell a majority, but not all of it. So our model is to partner, okay? We call it a 2 bites at the apple model. And what that really means is we buy a majority of the business, and so there's a substantial amount of cash up front. And you get to keep that. That isn't cash that is, for the most part, reinvested in the business to grow it, because we are blessed in mental health to have businesses that don't require that much money to grow them, okay? Requires woman power and manpower, but not all that much money. So we pay a substantial amount of cash up front. You get to keep that, so that our hope is de-risks things for you financially. But we work together. We bring all of our resources to the table, all of our expertise in culture, in renegotiating very aggressively with insurance companies, our expertise in adding services like psychological testing, like Spravato, okay, like TMS. We bring those resources to the table to grow the business to a place in roughly 4 or 5 years, let's say 4 to 6 years, where the business is worth much more than it is today. And if you want to come talk to me about the numbers of why that is the case, we can. Don't have time to cover it at the moment, but just trust me to say that if the business grows substantially, buyers of businesses value more profitable businesses much more highly, okay? So our goal is to do that. So the first bite of the apple is that initial cash up front, and then the second bite of the apple is when we resell the practice to a values-aligned buyer. We don't compromise on that. We don't want to sell to some ginormous insurance company. We don't want to sell to United, who, if you really care about people, they don't, right? They just don't. So it has to be a values-aligned buyer. So ask yourself, when you're thinking about, this alignment piece, what do you really want, okay? That's absolutely crucial. That's the most important thing. Know that you can sell 100% or you can do more of a partnership approach. Number 2, money, financials. What do we do here to get our financials in order? So there's 2 most important financial statements. Those are the P&L and the balance sheet, okay? So, and I'm going to spend more time on the P&L because that's more important. But, a balance sheet is a snapshot in time that shows the assets and the liabilities of your business. So if you have debt, that's going to tell us that, right? Balance sheet, easy. P&L, a little bit more complicated, okay? So with a P&L, generally what we're looking for are the last 3 years, annual P&Ls. So right now that would be 22, 23, and 24. And then for 25, the current year, we would want monthlies, okay? And that helps us establish the business's run rate. It helps us understand what is the business on pace for. Because maybe 24 wasn't the best year in the world, but maybe you're kicking ass in 25. And if you show us that, it gives us more leverage to make you a more generous offer than we might otherwise. And it helps us understand the potential of the business. So in terms of the P&Ls, the most important numbers, there's all kinds of numbers on there, but for our purposes, I want to keep it really, really simple. The 3 most important numbers are number 1, revenue, okay, top line revenue. Number 2, SDE, that stands for seller's discretionary earnings. And then number 4, EBITDA, okay? And we'll get into this, you can Google it. It stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Don't worry about what all those words mean. Just know that it's a very businessy, fancy way to call profit, okay? That's what it is. But I'm going to explain the differences between SDE and profit and EBITDA in a moment. But suffice to say that top-line revenue, everyone understands what that is, right? That's your gross that you've earned. When we subtract from that revenue 2 things, your COGS, your cost of goods sold, and your operating expenses, we get our SDE, okay? Now, the cost of goods sold is expenses associated with selling what you sell. So if you run just a therapy practice, that could mean the cost of the therapists. Could mean that. Sometimes that's in operating expenses. Don't worry about it. But we subtract your COGS and we subtract your operating expenses. That's your rent. That's your technology. That's all that good stuff, okay? So when we subtract from top-line revenue, your COGS and your operating expenses, we get your SDE, your seller's discretionary earnings. You can think about this as the profit of the business before you pay yourself a wage, like a market salary, okay? So take the example of a business with a top-line revenue of $2 million, and let's say the COGS and the operating expenses together are $1.4 million. The SDE is $600,000, okay? But as a buyer, generally a buyer in our case that leaves you in place to run it, or even a buyer that would ask you to leave or you would decide to leave, someone needs to run the business, right? And we need to pay someone to run the business because they're not going to do it for free. So the EBITDA just is the SDE subtracting a market salary. So let's assume in this sample scenario with the 2 million revenue and the 1.4 of expenses, the 600 of SDE, let's say a market salary is going to be 150,000. That would then mean your EBITDA is 450. Is everyone clear on that? Perfect. So that number is important because that's the number on which most professional buyers are going to value your business. You will get a multiple of EBITDA, okay? And another time we can talk about how we determine what the multiple is, but there's a multiple of EBITDA. Just like when you're selling a house, the market values houses more at some times, less at other times. So here, there'll be a market multiple. And the only other changes we'll make to the EBITDA reflect add backs, okay? So if there are like one-time unusual expenses, we can talk about those, and we do what I call the add back dance, where we go back and forth and talk about what is a one-time unusual expense, what isn't, okay? And then we may increase the profitability by adding back things. And so that process is what we call normalizing EBITDA. And we come up with a normalized EBITDA to reflect what it'll be like after the transaction. And then that's the number on which you get paid, okay? So that's really the most important stuff that I'd say you need to know about the financials. That's the core stuff. Let's talk about crises. They come up all the time. They tend to come up in the middle of transactions. I don't know why this is, but as I say, it can be an emotionally challenging scenario. So they come up all the time. You know, we'll be in the middle of a transaction, like 10 clinicians leave, and I swear they don't actually know there's a transaction happening, but they just leave, right? So crises come up all the time. What I would suggest you ask yourself is, what are the 3 biggest operational and cultural mistakes that I've made over the course of running this practice? And of those, which of them have implications that are still playing out? Which of those mistakes has cost me in a way that the business is experiencing today really significantly? And I would suggest you'd want to fix those. Hire a consultant if you're not sure, right? Get maybe a mastermind group together. Danielle, who I know is in the audience, she runs a free group, so you don't have to pay anything. And she is absolutely brilliant, and there she is, and has brilliant people with her there. So find resources, whether it's a specialized consultant or a group like Danielle's, and you'll get support. And the more of those that you fixed, obviously the more compelling your business will be to an acquirer, right? The more leverage you'll have to negotiate when you're with an acquirer, all that good stuff. So let me wrap with just a little bit more about what we look for. And I'm going to give you 2 or 3 quick icings on the cake that make you even more interesting to us. So we're focused on finding 2 more platform partners. So our mission is to buy 3 larger practices, and larger for us generally means north of $1 million of EBITDA, and do partnership deals with them, okay? And we're looking for 2 more, and we're looking for founders that are really aligned with our vision, right? That really share the values we have. That's super important. However, if you're not in that EBITDA range, I've been playing in my head at this conference with some interesting possibilities, and we still certainly want to support the ecosystem broadly. So we have, as you'll see over there, the Your Group Practice podcast. So we regularly interview both practice owners and other folks there, and we post lots of content on LinkedIn, have a pretty substantial audience of practice owners there. But beyond that, if you're, I'd say, between maybe 300 to 800 or so, if you're in that range, I think you might be well positioned to sell to one of your clinicians, okay? And so there's a way that clinicians can get financing to do that. Come and talk to me if that's at all interesting to you. So let me wrap it up with just a couple of things, a couple of little bits of icing on the cake, okay? So W-2s, that's one of the most important ones. There was a great presentation yesterday about W-2s. We're culture focused, so to us, there's a big mindset shift that goes from 1099 to W-2. We want to know that you're building something for the long term. Most acquirers, if they're ethical, will want the same as well. So W-2s, really, really important. And the one other thing I'll say is we want to know that when you show up to a meeting with us, you're human and warm, but you're also professional, okay? And we want to know that you communicate reliably. We spend a lot of time and effort, building a lot of infrastructure to be able to provide a very human experience to the people that we do transactions with, but it's also professional. And so how you show up in those conversations is super important. And I wish I had more time, but I want to wrap things up and just say, this is how you reach me. And it's such a pleasure and so exciting to be here with you guys. So thanks so much for listening.
thank you so much for hanging out with us and listening to our speakers from the Group Practice Conference 2025. We are so excited to have you join us there. Make sure you put on your calendars Black Friday. That's when tickets open up. We want to make sure that you grab that ticket right away. We are so excited to be hosting this here in Traverse City. We could not do this show without our amazing sponsors. And today, Headway is our sponsor. If you are looking for help running your practice and want the best group practice you can have, you're going to want to sign up with Headway. They are trusted by thousands of group practice leaders to simplify their insurance admin and reach more people through in-network care. If you're curious about how Headway can help work for you, head on over to join.headway.co/Joe. That's join.headway.co/Joe to learn more. Thank you for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.